The strike on Yuzhmash facility in Dnipro, which became a target of the combat testing of the new hypersonic medium-range ballistic missile Oreshnik, has captured the world's attention like no other event. As 2024 draws to a close, this undoubtedly remains the most discussed topic globally. What exactly happened on November 21st? Where did Oreshnik come from? What are its capabilities and just how dangerous is it? Can this type of missile even be intercepted? We'll delve into all of these questions in this episode. Enjoy watching. What happened on November 21st, 2024? For those still out of the loop, here's the key detail. One of Ukraine's most significant defense enterprises, Yuzhmash in Dnipro, formerly Dnepropetrovsk, was struck. This event sparked an avalanche of speculation and debate. What could deliver such an unprecedented display of power and devastation? Footage of the incident looked like the heavens themselves had split open to unleash divine wrath. Initially, many sources speculated it was an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM. However, this theory quickly fell apart under scrutiny. Why deploy an expensive, long-range missile when Ukraine and Russia are neighbors? Furthermore, if it had been an ICBM, it would have likely triggered a retaliatory launch from the other side of the globe, threatening to turn the whole world into dust. More credible outlets like NBC, CBS, ABC, and the BBC, citing Western officials, reported that the strike involved a medium-range ballistic missile, MRBM. The distinction is critical. MRBMs have shorter ranges than ICBMs and do not require prior notification to international partners, avoiding the immediate retaliatory strike that a potential nuclear missile launch might provoke. Here's the catch. Officially, Russia's armed forces didn't possess medium-range ballistic missiles. The last known MRBMs in their arsenal, the Soviet-era RSD-10 Pioneer, were dismantled following the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces INF Treaty signed by Reagan and Gorbachev on December 8, 1987. This treaty prohibited the development and deployment of intermediate and short-medium-range missiles. Given this, many concluded that the weapon used was a new development and not a Soviet-era missile. Speculation grew that the modern successor to the retired Pioneer might be the RS-26 Rubezh, a missile reportedly under development in contemporary Russia. Work on this missile system dates back to the 2000s, with its first test launch conducted in September 2011, a distant memory now. Following this, the missile seemingly vanished from the spotlight for years, since its technical specifications appeared to contradict the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. However, limited documentation at the time classified it as an intercontinental ballistic missile, but we'll revisit that later. In 2019, the INF Treaty expired, and it's clear that both Russia and the United States resumed active development in the previously restricted domain of short, medium, and intermediate-range missile systems. Recent events are undeniably linked to these renewed efforts. What exactly happened on November 21st remains unclear. Was it a demonstration of capability or a warning in response to Western nations authorizing the use of their long-range missiles to strike deep into Russian territory? It's likely a bit of both. But since this isn't a political channel, let's focus on the technical side of this 21st century wonder weapon. And indeed, it is a wonder weapon, despite the fact that the impact of the strike on Yuzhmash was significant, but wasn't catastrophic. Satellite imagery confirms that the facility wasn't reduced to rubble. Why? Because the missile launch was a training exercise using inert warheads, essentially dummy loads, instead of nuclear or even high-explosive payloads. Satellite images before and after the strike clearly showed this. However, the damage is still substantial, albeit localized. Specific details remain scarce, as the impact zones were immediately secured, with debris quickly collected, some jokingly suggesting they were parts of washing machines. Decide for yourself whether it looks like a home appliance or not. Here are the images. Where did Oreshnik come from? The existence of such systems, especially with nuclear capabilities, dramatically lowers the threshold for launching a nuclear strike. These missiles provide almost no chance for a timely counterstrike. The preparation and flight time of short and medium-range ballistic missile systems are significantly shorter than those of ICBMs, taking only a few minutes to reach their targets. This is precisely why such systems were once mutually prohibited under the INF Treaty. As mentioned earlier, the closest known relative to Oreshnik is the RS-26 Rubezh. Based on its presumed specifications, the RS-26 had a launch weight of approximately 40 to 50 tons and was capable of delivering 4 independently targeted warheads to a range of 2,000 to 6,000 kilometers. Initially, it was developed as a lightweight ICBM with a range exceeding 5,500 kilometers. An official interpretation designed to remain within the boundaries of the INF Treaty, which by then was rapidly becoming a non-thing. The development of the RS-26 was reportedly completed in the 2010s, but it never entered mass production, ceding its place in the series to the avant-garde hypersonic glide vehicle system. To be candid, even the Soviet Union at the peak of its power would have struggled to simultaneously develop a wide range of fundamentally different missile systems. This brings us to an intriguing connection: the Angara launch vehicle system, hailed as the hope of Russian space program. Why mention Angara here? It's worth noting that Soviet space exploration and its American counterpart was essentially a side branch of military programs. The concepts and ideas driving these fields are closely interlinked, making it no surprise that advancements in space technology often have military applications and vice versa. This is exactly what happened with the concept behind the Angara rocket family, which centers on its modular design, allowing for the assembly of a rocket tailored to specific needs using standardized blocks. Developed during the turbulent 1990s, when funding was scarce, this approach prioritized cost efficiency. At the same time, space exploration was becoming part of the global market, where success depended not just on political determination, but also on economic competitiveness. The value of Angara lies in its versatility. Need more range? Add booster stages. Extra range not needed. Use more payload blocks. So, you know what I'm talking about. The principle was simple yet profound. A modular system capable of accommodating any mission profile. But there's another angle to this story. Treaties like the INF were often dismissed as mere pieces of paper, which have expiration dates and loopholes. The US, with its vast post-Cold War budgets and technological edge, could easily bypass the constraints, leaving direct heir of the superpower in a precarious position. This prompted strategic ingenuity on Russia's part. In the 2000s, Russia's nuclear arsenal welcomed the Yars missile family, headlined by the RS-24 ICBM, the top missile system to this day. This system evolved from the earlier Topol and Topol-M missiles, developed by the Moscow Institute of Thermal Technology. The first Yars flight took place in 2007, with deployment following in 2009. Ironically, the origins of Topol-M trace back to Ukraine's Yuzhmash Design Bureau in Dnepropetrovsk. Khrushchev once quipped that Yuzhmash produced missiles like sausages, and it's no exaggeration. At its peak, the plant produced 100 rockets annually, or a missile every 3 days, an unmatched feat even today. Following the Soviet Union's dissolution, Moscow Institute of Thermal Technology inherited the program, but the process wasn't smooth. Critical components, such as electronics and warhead deployment systems, were developed in Ukraine. After the separation, these had to be recreated from scratch, delaying the Yars originally designed in the late 80s by 2 decades. Early on, the Moscow Institute of Thermal Technology project bore the codename Universal, encompassing a range of missile designs. One notable variant, the Yars S, was 17.5 meters long, more than 4 meters shorter than its predecessor, and significantly lighter. Officially, 5 designs within the Yars family have been confirmed, with projects such as Keter and Osina emerging over the years. Oreshnik fits seamlessly into this lineage, likely to combine features of the Yars family with elements of the RS-26 Rubezh, the system designed and tested many years ago, but then forgotten for over a decade. This was partly due to the fact that it raised concerns in the US, although officially, the Americans were more focused on the Iskander, claiming its missiles exceeded the 500-kilometer range limit. Meanwhile, Russia accused the US of deploying missile defense systems in Eastern Europe, which Russian experts believe are dual-purpose systems capable of not only intercepting intercepting ballistic missiles, but also launching them. On the other hand, China emerged from this situation as the big winner, unburdened by any treaties, and quietly continued developing short and medium-range missiles. Is anyone still surprised that, on August 2nd, 2019, the IMF treaty wasn't extended? However, as I mentioned earlier, the US wasn't so much worried about the Iskander or even Yars, but about the RS-26 Rubezh. But why? Because despite the fact that the Rubezh missile could strike targets nearly 7,500 kilometers away, as demonstrated, thus qualifying as a permissible ICBM, its main purpose was clearly to hit targets at much shorter ranges. This was indirectly indicated by at least two facts. First, Rubezh was tested at Kapustin Yar, with the Sari-Shargan testing range in Kazakhstan chosen as a target, with just over 2,000 kilometers between them. This was the traditional testing method for all Soviet medium-range missiles, with a range of 1,000 to 5,500 kilometers. Second, the Belarusian specialists developed a six-axle chassis, the MZKT-79291, just like the RS-10 Pioneer. Not the eight-axle one used for the Yars, but still designed to carry a 50-ton payload, and accordingly, allowing for a considerably shorter missile length. Meanwhile, the RS-26 Rubezh can also be classified as part of the Yars family. It uses the same engines, slightly modified stages, and essentially the same launch and guidance systems. In essence, it's a shortened and lighter version of the Yars. However, even when compared to the RS-26, the new Oreshnik system stands out with several distinct features. What are they exactly? What makes Oreshnik dangerous, and can it be intercepted? The main issue lies in its flight profile. Traditional ballistic missiles typically travel at high altitudes, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, or even 5,000 kilometers above the Earth. However, the trajectory of the Oreshnik more closely resembles that of the Iskander missile system. It flies at a very low altitude without entering outer space, essentially skimming the stratosphere at approximately 100 kilometers above the ground. This makes it impossible to intercept during the most vulnerable phases of its trajectory, launch, and mid-course, using existing or even prospective missile defense systems. Moreover, with the inclusion of hypersonic maneuverable warheads, the effective range of the Oreshnik could be significantly less than the minimum range of the Rubezh missiles, which is around 1,000 kilometers. For example, after the launch from Kapustin Yar to a target in Dnepropetrovsk, the missile covered a distance of less than 800 kilometers. This means the Oreshnik is not just a medium-range missile. It is a multi-purpose missile capable of covering all ranges beyond the reach of the Iskander system, starting from 500 kilometers. The second key feature of the Oreshnik is its multiple independently maneuverable warheads. These warheads are capable of performing evasive maneuvers at hypersonic speeds, similarly to the Avangard system. Systems like the Kinjal or Zircon cannot do this. The inability to maneuver at hypersonic speeds is a fundamental weakness of American missile defense systems. By the way, the RSD-10 Pioneer also featured a warhead with 3 nuclear re-entry vehicles, each capable of targeting different locations. This made it a formidable weapon that could bypass the missile defense systems of its era. However, the Pioneer lacked hypersonic capabilities. The third standout feature of the Oreshnik is its incredible speed. According to the president, it reaches Mach 10. In practice, this figure could be closer to Mach 11 to 12, or even higher during certain flight phases. But even Mach 10, approximately 3.5 kilometers per second, is exceptionally fast. At that speed, even a simple metal slug would cause catastrophic destruction upon impact. For instance, the kinetic energy of the 4 to 5 ton warhead of the Avangard, even as an inert projectile, is comparable to the destructive power of an 18-ton bomb. The warhead of the Oreshnik is slightly smaller, around 1.5 tons, which is still 3 times larger than that of the Iskander. Additionally, the Avangard's warhead is just a single block, while the Oreshnik can carry between 2 and 6 warheads. Each of these is further divided into 6 subcomponents, 1 functional warhead and 5 decoys. Furthermore, every block is equipped with its own guidance system and propulsion, enhancing its capability to evade interception. However, all warheads in the block could potentially be decoys. The configuration can be adjusted as needed. This is why Ukrainian sources claim there were 2 actual strikes on Yuzhmash, while the rest of the fireworks were the result of decoys. Altogether, we observe 6 impacts with 6 submunitions in each. Additionally, these blocks are clearly smaller than those used by the Avangard. For instance, the Avangard's warhead, housed under a 2.5-meter diameter missile nose cone, fits only 1 block. Meanwhile, missiles in the Yars family, with a nose cone diameter of 1.58 meters, can fit at least 2 actual warheads. A smaller projectile also mathematically reduces the chances of successful interception. Moreover, the Oreshnik blocks are likely easier and cheaper to produce. First, the physics at Mach 10 are clearly less complex than the demands placed on the Avangard, which flies at Mach 27. Only 6 Avangards are deployed annually. Second, Oreshnik is maximally unified with the RS-24 Yars, which was manufactured at a rate of more than 20 missiles per year. If Oreshnik is a simplified version, it logically follows that production rates should be even higher. Even the conservative expert estimates suggest tens of units per year. Thus, claims that there are no more than 10 Oreshnik missiles currently in existence are either misleading or uninformed. While this might be true today, their numbers are likely to grow exponentially over time. Can Oreshnik be intercepted? Given that Oreshnik can fly along a highly flattened trajectory similar to the Iskander-M, it can cover thousands of kilometers in mere minutes. The flight times have already been calculated in detail by the West European experts. To summarize, the RS-26 missile can cover a distance of 5,000 kilometers in roughly 15 minutes. But that's not where the concerns end. With such speed and the ability to maneuver at hypersonic velocities, tracking and intercepting this new Russian warhead is extremely difficult, if not outright impossible. What systems could potentially counter it? Of course, uninformed individuals online quickly point to the Patriot system, claiming it was designed to intercept short and medium-range ballistic missiles. However, its effectiveness in real combat scenarios has been questionable at best. Theoretically, it is possible to intercept Oreshnik, but only during the initial stage of flight when the missile is gaining altitude, which ideally should be significantly higher than its cruising altitude of 100 kilometers. It gradually descends to that level later in its flight. However, to achieve this, an anti-missile system would need to be located extremely close, ideally within Ukrainian territory, and even then, any interception would logically occur over Russian territory. And no one is likely to agree to such an action, at least for now. Of course, all of this is speculation on my part. Nonetheless, the high command of the Ukrainian armed forces has no illusions about this. Almost immediately, the discussion shifted not to the Patriot system, but to the need for the Terminal High-Altitude Area Defense Missile Defense System, at the very least. How else can we explain the fact that Yuzhmash was undoubtedly protected by Patriots? After all, this facility had long been involved in the development and production of components for American missiles. Yet informed Telegram channels reported that Oreshnik wasn't even detected on Patriot radar systems until the last moment. Currently, no radar in the world is capable of detecting a hypersonic target, and launching an interceptor missile at a target you cannot see is like trying to hit a bullet with a slingshot. Theoretically possible, but practically. TOD is an American missile defense system designed for exo-atmospheric interception of medium and long-range missiles. It can also serve as an air defense system against aircraft. TOD entered service in the United States in 2008. However, the U.S. has only 7 TOD batteries. One is stationed on the island of Guam, another in South Korea, and a third was redeployed to Israel. That leaves only 4 THAAD batteries to protect the continental United States. Additionally, each battery costs $3 billion, 3 times the cost of a Patriot system, and a single missile launch costs $20 million. It is highly unlikely that any of these systems will be sent to Ukraine. There's not much point in it anyway. Indeed, the THAAD missile is 3 times heavier than Patriot missiles and has an impressive range. However, its tests were conducted against targets simulating the outdated Soviet R-17 missile. Yes, that missile could also reach speeds of up to 3 kilometers per second, but it lacked electronic countermeasures and had no maneuvering capabilities. So, there is no real defense against Oreshnik, and it's unlikely one will emerge in the near future. The ability to reach speeds of 10 to 15 Mach, fly at a low altitude of 100 kilometers, and perform maneuvers under such conditions effectively invalidates the entire concept of the U.S. missile defense system, a system that has had tens of billions of dollars invested in it, with more to come since there's no alternative available today. With a destructive power equivalent to 3 Iskanders, Oreshnik can strike any point on the continent. In theory, by experimenting with booster modules and swapping some of them for warheads, the missile's range could be extended to 2,000 kilometers, carrying a live warhead of 4 to 5 tons. This is truly a one-of-a-kind weapon that will undoubtedly keep the entire continent on edge. Unfortunately for Ukraine, it has found itself in the unenviable position of being a testing ground for such weaponry. A grim reality, no matter how one views it. It feels like we've returned to the early 1980s, with the infamous standoff between the Pershing and Pioneer missile systems. Back then, the fear of uncontrolled nuclear escalation led to the signing of the INF Treaty. I'd like to believe that in today's world, common sense will eventually prevail, and we'll see something akin to an INF Treaty too. I hope this video has answered your questions about Oreshnik. If so, please show your appreciation with a like. Or better yet, by subscribing to the channel. Once again, I'll say that it would be far better if such weapons were only ever discussed in videos and never actually used. I wish everyone peaceful skies above, and look forward to seeing you in my videos.